From ACOTAR's Resand to Breaking Bad and Dexter, you probably thought that our infatuation with villains and bad guys was a relatively new thing, but I think we humans have been struggling with falling in love with the devil for as long as our existence. What is so sexy about being bad? And what is so appealing about the villain? And why, despite knowing better, are our imaginations in love with the devil? Hi, I'm Alexandra, and I'm a spicy romance author, and this is After the Highlight, where we explore the ideas that refuse to stay on the page. And today we're going to talk about why we love villains and anti-heroes, and what heaven and hell stories get wrong about evil. Mandatory disclaimer section. It's impossible to talk about these books without discussing Christianity as a whole. But this is not a theological discussion. I'm not trying to denigrate your beliefs or challenging what you believe at all. This is a book talk, and we're talking about these books, and they just happen to be talking about how society and culture have metabolized the ideas of heaven, hell, and the devil. That's all I'm interested in. The anti-hero feels like a very new motif, with the popularity of Breaking Bad, Dexter, and The Sopranos. Anytime we see people doing bad things, and then in the same breath, we see them with like relatable struggles like health concerns and panic attacks and family problems, we're like softened to their like bad actions, unless they're women, because, you know, women are held to impossible standards. As soon as we see someone like us, and as soon as we understand their struggles, we start to almost forgive their transgressions. In Christianity, evil is an external force, which I think becomes a flaw in the heaven, hell, devil retellings. I definitely struggled with like empathy for the devil while reading Paradise Lost. If you don't know, this book was written in the 17th century, and it's a retelling of what happens when God kicks Satan out of heaven for starting an angel rebellion, and then Satan tempts Adam and Eve, and they get kicked out of the Garden of Eden. But guys, this book gives Satan a huge POV section, and like he has a goal, and he's like competently executing his goal, and like the book almost makes God his antagonist, like trying to thwart Satan in his achievement of satisfaction and happiness. Like Milton, bro, like what were you doing there? You were hoping that I'd come to this book with like animosity towards Satan, and yet here I am like, woohoo, like he's the driver of action. Like while God is just playing passively, he's just this passive role, just letting things happen. Satan's out here like getting things done. And some of the best quotes in this book came from Satan. Like the one where Satan is upset because he was kicked out of heaven, but he decides that it's better to be a ruler of himself and of hell than it is to have another rule over him. That with the power of his mind, he's going to turn his suffering into something with meaning. How, like, relatable is that? One who brings a mind not to be changed by place or time. The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of a heaven. I mean, maybe Milton was trying to do, like, a Sarah J. Maas thing, like what she did with Tamlin, where we're, like, rooting for him, and then, like, we do a 180, and we're like, oh, he's the bad guy. I'm gonna show you, like, how wrong you were to be rooting for him. Which, like, yeah, okay, Milton, like, 10 out of 10 for that plan, but, like, 3 out of 10 on execution, because, like, I was still rooting for him. Something I keep coming back to in my books is how evil is, like, personified. When I wrote Sebastian the Dark Perception series, I was going for the SJM trope of, like, the guy that you think is the villain is, like, surprise, he's, like, the anti-hero, morally gray character. But if I write an antagonist, my brain starts going down the, like, path of, like, okay, but, like, why? And, like, what horrible actions were done to this character that, like, now they're, you know, just, like, traumatized and, like, having to, like, hurt people type of thing, you know what I mean? I think empathy and sympathy for people is just part of who I am, and I identify as like a highly insensitive person, an empath, or whatever you want to call it. And I think that deep down, the worst people who are doing horrible things in this world and in fiction are just like insecure, hurt, traumatized people. And that hurt people saying it just like, I don't know, that really organizes my whole life. Like I see everyone through that lens. Like literally, it's like the devil. He's just like this poor traumatized guy that has daddy issues. I mean, like, and mommy issues, honestly. Like he has the whole range of issues. Like I feel bad for him. I think ACOTAR is the best example of this, and it had a huge impact on my brain and everyone's. It was the first time I saw a romance author who completely flipped the script of what the character development was in the book that she first built. So we saw everything that Tamlin did in book 1 in a new light. And while the fandom does like to hate on Tamlin, I think the rage bait is actually an outsized reaction to the fact that SJM successfully tricked us into doubting our own interpretations of the events that were given. In book 1, Tamlin was the NMC. We didn't get his POV necessarily, but we got all of his clues and hints. And then in book 2, Rhys suddenly gets his own spotlight, and Tamlin is only discussed either by the terrible things that he does, which we would have found romantic if it was in another context. But interestingly enough, A Court of Silver Flames turns Rhys, like our love for Rhys, on its head. And just like Akamath did for Tamlin, because we get Nesta's POV, and Rhys is suddenly this guy who's like making shitty decisions. So POV is like one of the most important things when it comes to relatability. And I think that's why the devil is always more interesting than God, at least in Paradise Lost here, because his struggle is made tangible. And for those of us who are empathetically inclined, it's incredibly hard to let the bad guy get away with like a one-dimensional evil villain laugh type of vibe. In my books, almost directly after introducing a villain or an antagonist, I literally start writing like the villain's book. It happened with Vince in the Dark Perception series, who like he had way more redeeming than he needed to do. It also happened with like simple tiny little bullies in A Witch's Inconvenient Crush. When Benjamin shows up, he has like a couple lines, but I'm like, okay, but like why? Why are you like hurting people? Like what makes this person like do these horrible things? And I'm just like I just love that. It's just so exciting to me. And I think that always leads to my favorite thing to explore in romance novels, which is trauma. The Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri? If I'm mispronouncing that, let me know. The first book is the Inferno, which is the most popular because it follows through hell. And then we have Purgatory, and then we have Paradise. So we go from hell to Purgatory to heaven. And this trilogy is basically what happens when you write Bible fanfiction, which is like self-insert Bible fanfiction, because Dante's like, hey, you know what'd be really cool if like I wrote a book where all my enemies are in hell and my like idol, my fictional idol, Virgil, was like my tour guide through all of the places. Yeah, that'd be super fun. And I'm like, yep, Dante would have loved AO3. In these books, the evil and good is firmly centered on people's actions or inactions. The rings of hell and the phases of purgatory are all based on what people did or didn't do in their lives and like what they're experiencing as their punishment in the afterlife. The actions are still like the external force. And especially in hell, Virgil is always like admonishing Dante for feeling sympathy or empathy towards anyone who's like, you know, like burning up or like drowning or like, you know, made up of trees. Like Virgil literally, he like, so everyone in this one place is like made up of a tree. So Virgil's like, Dante, stop being nice to these people. And then he just like he like snaps a branch off someone and then they're crying. This tree is crying and it starts bleeding because Virgil just like snapped off like an arm or something. And like that imagery has like really stuck with me. I would say my enjoyment of the 3-book trilogy went like on a downward slope. The Inferno is really, really good. It makes sense why it's the most popular. Hell is just this visceral, disgusting place where you can really feel a sense of yourself like reacting to the situations. And as they move to purgatory and then into paradise, things get less and less concrete as you like kind of move up the spectrum. Like hell is just like this vivid imagery and like purgatory is like meh. And then paradise is just like this floaty blobs of like white souls and clouds. Like there's no setting that's like very like grounded and embodied. And I mean, that makes sense because heaven would be a kind of a movement away from like the disgusting and grossness of like the human body and into this like peak amazingness of like disembodied bliss, which is a good example of how the devil and evil are these like tangible embodied things where heaven is bliss and something that we like get tongue-tied over like describing. Pleasure and happiness and contentment are just so foreign. And God as a force of God or benevolence is just like kind of like unknowable. which unfortunately makes God a really bad protagonist in most books. While the devil is like struggling and striving and trying, God is just blissed out happiness. Sometimes he has like Jesus like do his bidding like in Paradise Lost, and that helps, but Jesus still has this like untouchable quality. He isn't embodied in the world, and so it's hard to relate to him. So when I wrote Sell Your Soul and Sell Your Heart, I made the big bads, the antagonists, the devil and the goddess, and these deities were more like deities in Roman and Greek mythology, where like they have sibling rivalries and jealousy, and they were rude and bored and mean, and like they were just like more human and relatable. And I think that just makes so much more fun environment to play around in fiction. The Master and Margarita was such a good book, and it gave the devil like a really rich characterization. He was more of a trickster kind of devil than like a big powerful devil who like just does big bad things. What made this book really interesting is that I literally had no idea what was going to happen next, like in a genuine sense of like, I have no idea where this is going. What all of these books do though is make evil this external force. It's a character, it's an action or inaction, it's all out there. But what happens when we start to give the devil or the villain an actual POV, we start to see that like evil isn't outside of us, but it's in here. When we cast evil out and give it the form of devils and demons, we're creating this like barrier between us and them. And then instead of acknowledging that we're all like capable of good and evil. And when we give evil a personification of the devil or a political figure or an immigrant or a poor person, and in doing so we abandon the parts of us that are those negative characteristics. I'd like to make the argument that evil is not an external force, but an internal one. And that when we empathize with villains and bad guys and the devil, we aren't heathens just wanting to rebel for rebellion's sake. People who recognize their own capacity for evil and goodness inside of them, the ones who are rebelling against the system, those people are looking for connection. Because the opposite of hell isn't floaty, dissociative, blissed out heaven. I read Angels Before Man for the first time in 2023, and it's like this beautiful queer retelling of Satan as an angel, Lucifer, up to the point that he fights Michael and then gets kicked out of heaven. Honestly, now that I think about it, maybe that's why I read Angels Before Man before I read Paradise Lost, which I guess, because like timeline-wise, that works out perfectly because, you know, this is the part where he's an angel and then he gets kicked out of heaven, and then Paradise Lost picks up right where he gets kicked out of heaven and then like into the Adam and Eve time. Yeah, like obviously that probably colored a lot of my reading of Paradise Lost, because in Angels Before Man, it's just so... Lucifer is just like... He's like baby girl, you know? Like, you just want to protect him. It contextualized that, like, what we're all looking for is love and acceptance. And that's what actual heaven would be. Not, like, dissociated bliss, but, like, divine and unconditional love. So, in Angels Before Man, Satan is told that he's the most beautiful angel that God ever created. And he is also told that he should not look at himself or accept any compliments or like any praise because that's prideful. So he goes around for years embarrassed and ashamed and like frankly kind of like confused, because like when he has like an embodied experience of pride, like a soft smile or like an expanded chest or like a feeling of like safety and security in his skin and body, God and the other angels remind him that it's a bad thing and he should be ashamed of himself for feeling like that little like spark of like, oh, you like me? Like, that, like, warm feeling. Like, they all tell him, like, knock it off, because you're getting too big for your britches. The book is amazing, and it's also alluding to, like, how queer love and how it's a natural thing and that shouldn't be shamed. So, like, we have, like, that kind of allegory on top of it. And, like, what we're actually striving for is like a sense of respect and love and acceptance from other people. But God only wants Lucifer in heaven if he performs the way he's like supposed to. And so Lucifer descends into like a madness, like Joker style, and leads the rebellion of the angels, creates like sin, it's horrible, it's ugly, but it's like also the first time that you get the sense that this rebellion is less about turning away from something and instead turning towards like something totally different. Not just like the opposite of an old paradigm. Satan like creates the sin out of thin air, and like that's a big turning point in the book, because up to that point God was the only one who could create. Haven't you ever wondered why Father is so strict about our subservience? It's because disobedience is creation. Create with me, Michael, and let's call it sin. Because like when you rebel against something, whether it's a political system or your parents, you are still centering that thing in your definition. So if you're the opposite of something, what you're engaging in is the thing that you don't want. So like, you know, they say in like the metaphysical world, like what you resist persists. That kind of idea. In my book, Sell Your Soul, there's a chapter where the MMC Remy is dealing with protesters that have come to his concert. And so he blasts the song that is like a deep like fuck you, fuck your religion, your ways, your beliefs, blah, blah, blah. And that's like all well and good. I love a rebellion and it gets my heart racing. But then Remy sees the crowd of his fans who are outside the venue waiting to see the concert. And he sees these people that like they're not rebelling against the protesters. They're showing up for something they love. Like his band, his lyrics, his music, which is actually the deepest expression of rebelling, right? Like showing up and supporting something that you love. So Remy and the band members, they decide to dress up in skirts and like feminize themselves and with like makeup and hair clips and like outfits. So they're still like being like the most antagonistic version of themselves, but the energy shifts from one of like I'm rebelling against you to like I'm rebelling as a form of energetic connectioning with like this community. With the people who showed up. And in the second book, Sell Your Heart, Emerson, which is Remy's twin brother, is deeply entrenched in the perfectionist narratives that he believes that if he follows all the rules and he bends and morphs himself into what other people want, he will finally be safe. And he's looking for love and acceptance, and in doing so, he pushes away the people who would have actually given him the unconditional love because he's too afraid to live outside the standards of norms of what's like good and like right. And until finally his disobedience creates a new way forward, and his sin leads him to what he really wants, that unconditional love. So I think what the true difference is between heaven and hell, isolation and community, the thing that ultimately triumphs over evil is love. You should have figured that out. I'm a romance writer. But seriously, as cheesy and predictable as it sounds, love conquers doubt, love conquers fear. And it's not even that love conquers, it like expands and envelops the fear and the doubt and the grief and loss, and it like holds it in this like benevolent universe soul like consciousness. You'll have to let me know what you think about villains and the personification of evil in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts of like which parts of this resonated with you. And if you'd like to keep hanging out with me, I recommend this video. And if you're feeling the vibe, like and subscribe. It'd be really funny if I died from a coughing fit while talking about Jesus and the devil.
Yeah. The good girls, they go to heaven, but the bad girls, they get backstage. Oh, the good girls, they go to heaven, but the bad girls, they get backstage. Oh, the good girls, they go to heaven.